And welcome in, joined by Director of Athletics Keith Carter. And Keith, football right around the corner. I know you and your staff are really excited to welcome all these Ole Miss fans coming into town on Saturday.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. Yeah, no, it's going to be great, and it's hard to believe that it's time for football. The summer has flown by as it always does. But yeah, just excited. Night game in the vault. Weather's looking great. So it should be a lot of fun.
As you know, the university announced a $1 billion endowment just the other day, 215.6 million in 2025, record 28% increase over last year. The good news for athletic department, 55.2 million will go towards athletics. That does not include the Grove Collective gifts. I know that was exciting for you and your staff. How do you plan on utilizing those funds?
Yeah, well, first of all, just, shout out to all of those involved in building that endowment. That doesn't happen in just one year. I mean, that is a long process to get to $1 billion in an endowment. And, our folks at the Foundation, obviously leadership across campus, that's incredible. For us, shout out to Denson Hollis and his team, record-breaking year for fundraising in the Ole Miss Athletics Foundation. Really happy for them. And you mentioned the Grove Collective giving. That's been tremendous as well. But really, gives Denson and his team a little bit more of a pat on the back because a lot of those dollars in a traditional year that went to the collective would have gone to the Athletics Foundation. So just tremendous fundraising across the board. And you can't, leave out the fans and donors. They've stepped up in a tremendous way, and we're going to need them to continue to do that, obviously, in the new landscape of college athletics. But I think there's proof of content. We've done well in this NIL world, and you obviously built great rosters and won a lot of games. So our hope is we can continue to do that.
Which leads in perfectly to what I was going to ask you next. What are your overall thoughts on this NIL wave that we're going through as a collective college football or college athletic world and the world of revenue sharing? I know you, along with Lane Kiffin, the Growth Collective, Dr. Boyce, have been kind of at the forefront of this. What are your kind of overall thoughts of where the university is right now?
Yeah, I think we're in really good shape. I think we were creative and proactive and have been along the way, and we'll continue to do that. It's a new world, obviously, with July 1 with revenue sharing starting. I think just largely we're going to ask our donors to start sending those major gifts back over to the Athletics Foundation, so that we can support Rev Share. But Grow Collective membership is going to be really, really important. We want 5, 6, 7 8,000 members over there if we can, to continue that because we're not exactly sure what it's going to look like moving forward, but we feel like, having those funds and the membership of the collective and what Walker and his team are doing over there will be very, very important. And obviously we need, continued record giving over in the Athletics Foundation as well. So we'll have some information actually coming out on that here in the coming days and some education around what that could look like. I was in Birmingham last week for AD meetings. Every AD is trying to navigate this world and figure out what it's going to look like. So, but we'll get there. We have a great team, great leadership, and hopefully we can continue to have great success.
Not long ago, I saw that it broke that the University of Memphis was adding logos to the end zone. They were actually a good partner of yours. As FedEx is going to be added to the end zone. In regards to logos on the field, maybe apparel in the end zones, where does the university stand kind of right now on the possibility of adding any type of corporate sponsorship to the playing surface?
We're working hard. Chris Helsel and the Learfield team, they're working really hard to find that right partner. We haven't found it yet. We've had some meaningful conversations with several, corporations and just haven't gotten to the finish line. The apparel patches, we think that's going to come at some point as well. We do not have approval from the NCAA on that yet, but we think that's coming. So we're actually, kind of proactively looking for a partner there as well. And I've said it before, and I got a little heat because said I don't want us to look like NASCAR, and that's not a disparagement to NASCAR, but we want to make sure that we find the right partner. We find what makes sense to go on our field, to go on our jerseys, and we'll find that. But that revenue is going to be very, very important. You're seeing it across the country. Different ones pop up as we head into the season, so we'll continue to work toward that.
I know, obviously, the field named after Dr. Hollingsworth, and it's, of course, Vaught Hemingway Stadium. Has there been any discussions about possibly naming the stadium after a corporate partner?
No, not really yet. We're actually kind of getting back into the planning stages of maybe a stadium project. We've got some things we're looking at, and obviously we've got to be very creative in that space too. When you start talking about doing a stadium project, that's in the hundreds of millions, obviously. Uh, and in the new world we're living in, I'm not sure you're ever going to see a $300 or $400 million capital campaign again. Though I think those are kind of in the past. But can we add private investment? Can we get creative in that space to find dollars that are outside of kind of our budget and our donor giving and those type of things? So we're looking at that. And if that were to happen, you may look at some different naming opportunities. But I think currently we're looking more at field and apparel.
And kind of looking at the facilities upgrade on campus. I know the softball facility is really nice. And the facility, I know you're very proud about that. Any particular upgrades for facilities, athletic facilities going on right now?
Well, we just finished a renovation over at soccer, a new field, new scoreboard, new sound. We flipped the dugouts to the other side and did some things there, and we got a few more things planned there for the Gillum Center that's coming. But I know our soccer team has been very happy with the changes over there, and Molly has as well. We're looking at some renovations to our golf building out at the golf course. Refreshing locker rooms, coaches' offices, and those type of things. And then again, as I mentioned, trying to figure out, what we could do potentially with our stadium. I think if you look across really all of our facilities, we're in pretty good shape. We've done a good job over the past, probably 10 years or so. We've hit a little bit of a lull as we've tried to figure out kind of what the rev share world looks like. But it's time to start having those conversations again. And I think if you hit the stadium and can do some meaningful things there, overall our facility should be in really good shape.
Two new names, Drew Ingraham along with Josh Bender, in regards to fan engagement. Those are two names that fans will kind of see. Any particular new game day enhancement? I know the SEC shined on you guys pretty good with night games this year versus a lot of noon kickoffs. So fans are excited about that. Thing that you could share right now that fans could look forward to.
Yeah, we every year you try to, find new and creative things. You want people to be in the stadium, and if they're not there, have kind of that FOMO feeling. And so we want to make sure that we do that. Obviously, having night games helps that. You can do more things with fireworks and light shows and different things like that. So that'll be great. We've made some enhancements for students. We sent that out to our students maybe last week or so. Reduced concession pricing, misters, phone chargers, things like that hopefully will help them out. But we've revamped some of our concession areas to make those a little more, have a little more ease of use and getting in and out of those so you can get back to your seat and watch the game. But yeah, just those type of things. One of the things Brad, that we're really trying to emphasize this year is that we've kind of gotten to the standard at Ole Miss where we're expecting to win games. We know that last year the field rush for Georgia was a lot of fun for people. But we got to get past, we got to kind of get past that. And we got some messaging coming out on that as well on the field rush situation. We need our folks to kind of hold themselves accountable, celebrate in the stands, and we know we're going to have big wins. We're accustomed to that now. So we're going to have a lot of messaging around that. We did put some more punitive things in place for that. If there is a field rush, we hope that we don't get there. We would certainly not want to do those things, but our fans and we got to hold ourselves accountable. And again, we know we're going to have big wins. We know they're coming, and we got to make sure that we celebrate those in the right way. So you'll see some messaging around that as well.
I know one thing you and I have talked about in the past, and I know is very special to you, is obviously it takes a lot of money to operate an athletic department, especially in the world of NIL and where we are right now. But you also think it's very important to not price fans out. What are some processes right now to make sure that every single fan that supports Ole Miss can kind of be touched throughout this kind of different time in college athletics?
Yeah, we wrestle with that a lot, Brad, and you and I have talked about that. And, you've got to have the revenues to pay coaches and now pay players and build rosters and do all those things. So, you've seen us implement some different revenue, mechanisms, obviously the Grove being one of those and some different things. But we also, to your point, want to make sure that people can still come and enjoy. And, we try to get tickets in the hands of people when we can. And, the CGAs this is the last year of the capital gift agreement for much of the stadium. So we're looking at, what pricing for that's going to look like moving forward. And we always want to have at least a section or two of our stadium that is affordable. I have three children. That's a total of five. I mean, if you're bringing five people to a game, that can get pretty expensive. Especially when you don't live in Oxford, you got to find somewhere to stay, you got to travel, you got to eat, all those things. So we want to try to work with our fans and our donors to make it accessible as we move forward. But also, trying to educate with, the price of poker has continued to go up. So we've got to find that right balance.
And kind of navigating that over to the Grove that you made mention, your staff was very quick to point out that there were some changes coming to the Grove in regards to tailgating and setting up that sort of thing. But the most important thing is that you're not altering to where you can't get spots to tailgate and that sort of thing. So there was a lot of communication about that piece in the Grove as well.
Yeah, and actually, I was in a meeting this morning. I think Neil Mead and his team had a meeting with our vendors last night, and it went really well. I think the vendors feel like the program was set up very well. And I feel like when our fans show up on Saturday, they should see the exact same thing. They should see a great experience. Did it cost a little bit more maybe to get your tent and get your setup? It did, and we understand that. We tried to spread it out, really across the Grove as much as we can. There are still opportunities to set up your own tent for no cost. So those opportunities are still there too. But in another way to try to find revenue to build these great rosters and hopefully win a lot of games. But again, hopefully the experience in the Grove itself will be very similar, if not better, and our fans can really enjoy that.
Men's basketball coach Chris Beard had a fireside chat with some of the students not long ago. Before we know it, Keith, men's basketball, women's basketball will be here very quickly. The roster's loaded on paper. Obviously, you have to perform on the floor. What are your overall thoughts about Coach Chris Beard and how fast he's got Ole Miss kind of back on the winning ways? But has it surprised you how quick he's elevated the program?
Not really. Because if you look at his kind of past and his pedigree and his history, he's been able to do that really everywhere he's been. And, year two has always been a big year for him, in all of his stops. I feel like to your point, this roster that we have this year on paper, and two, just looking at them. I mean, I was over with the team the other day and they just looked the part of an SEC team, very physical, very long, very athletic. But in this world, it's a lot of new faces. You got to find the right chemistry. It has to work. But Coach Beard and the staff have done a tremendous job. Maybe a little bit ahead of schedule, but man, I know they're pushing, and a Final Four is what they want for sure.
It also, Coach Joe has kind of turned that women's basketball program on its head, really kind of just breaking through, as she likes to say, new ceiling after new ceiling. Uh, it's been a lot of positive things happening inside the pavilion, and the crowds have been great. I know you're excited to see what she can do this year as well.
Yeah, I actually met with her yesterday and had a great meeting. She really likes her team this year. Again, just like the men, they look the part. They're big, athletic, strong. They're gonna be a really good team. And Coach Yo has just set a standard that getting in the tournament is kind of the norm now. And now it's just how far can we go. And her aspirations are the same as Coach Beard. She wants to take a program to the Final Four, and it's never been done here at Ole Miss, and she wants to do that. And this roster has a chance to be really good.
Coming up as a player, kind of final questions here. Your 6 year is kind of flown by, I'm sure, as athletic director at Ole Miss. Arkansas native, played at Ole Miss in administration, now as the AD. Kind of what do you kind of look back and see what makes you proud? Some things that have happened over your career. What do you kind of look favorably on, and what are you most proud of as an athletic director?
Well, a lot of things. It's been kind of a challenging 6 years, honestly. A lot of new stuff and new things, and not the traditional. The chair of AD hasn't been as traditional as it has in the past, and so I feel very proud about the staff we've built. I feel like we have a really good staff. Great coaches. But for me, it's about the student athletes, and it always will be. To me, I owe so much to Ole Miss. Even if I wasn't sitting in this chair, just the people that I've met, the relationships, the education, and we want to make sure that our student athletes have that same experience and feel the same way. So it's all about building those relationships, and when you're meeting with recruits and parents, talking about our family, our Ole Miss family, and what that really means. So my hope is that we can continue to do that. We've had a lot of success. We've had three of the three top years statistically we've ever had at Ole Miss in the past three of the past 5 years. So we want to build off of that, grow on that, and we certainly feel like we're just getting started.
I'm asked this final question. I'm asked this a lot. I will ask you. People ask me on the shows that I'm able to go on, what makes Ole Miss successful or when you kind of took the helm, and I was like, well, it's kind of a perfect circle of Dr. Boyce, you, in this case, Lane Kiffin in football, and then you look at the Grove Collective, and then you look at Denson Hollis and the foundation. It's kind of like one circle of communication that's kind of all working for the same goal. A pretty good summation of why Ole Miss has been successful under your regime.
Yeah, you nailed it. I think we have to be very efficient here at Ole Miss. I was sitting with my buddy Chris Del Conte at meetings last week. Texas's budget 355 million. Ours is around 170, so they have double the budget. So we got to do things right here. We got to be efficient. We got to pull the rope the same direction. We have got to have great leadership, which we do with Chancellor Boyce. Couldn't ask for a better partner across campus there. You mentioned all the players there, but it's everybody. It's the fans. It's just been a really good run, and I think we've shown that you can do more with less, but you've got to be efficient and you've got to be calculated and intentional about it. So again, we feel great about what we've accomplished. I don't see any reason why all of those things and all of that kind of circle of trust and communication would change. We feel great about the future, and you'll look forward to seeing what we can do.
He's Keith Carter, Director of Athletics at Ole Miss, kind enough to give us a few minutes today. Keith, football season right around the corner. Thanks for joining us today.
Yep, thanks, Brad.